Okay, guys, so I should have a really simple subject for today's vlog discussion, right? But I'm afraid I don't because what I actually have today is one of probably the biggest historical mystery murder who done it, that ever happened. And I'm talking about the JFK assassination, right? This is a bit of a painful topic for me to discuss because I really like John F. Kennedy. I think he was one of the best American presidents, one of the most iconic political figures in modern history, and for me, definitely somebody I really look up to, somebody that I really admire, like his political actions, his philosophy, his approach to issues. That's not to say John F. Kennedy was perfect, right? Like, I think when I was young, I probably saw John F. Kennedy as like a guy who couldn't make mistakes. But as I have grown a little bit older and matured a bit more, I've come to understand that it's hard to get a president that's gonna be perfect, you know. And that's just something, whether conservative or liberal, whether American, Canadian, or Chinese, or Russian, or Cuban, or whatever nationality, Indian, whatever nationality, it's really hard to get a political figure that's gonna tick off all the boxes and be perfect. And so I think that's something I've learned a little bit about. So I really like John F. Kennedy. It pains me to think he was assassinated. The world lost such a great political leader who really could have done a lot of good on the world stage in general, and for America, his nation in particular. So I'm gonna go into kind of look at what I think really happened, just to give you like a layman's view after doing a ton of research into the JFK assassination. I'm not a government expert. I'm not an expert researcher. So I'm just giving you like the basic layman's version as I see it. After doing a ton of research and without having access to a lot of complicated, sensitive or classified information, right? This is just me, just an interested individual, a layman, just looking at publicly available information from Wikipedia and Google and places, and just giving you my view on what happened. But also, this brings into mind, I'm also gonna share with you guys kind of like my advice for you if you're ever gonna be president, and trying to avoid getting assassinated. I'm gonna give you my biggest tip for that, as well as give you my own perspective for why I don't want to be president, right? Now you might call me a coward or whatever, but that's all right. That's okay. So I did a ton of digging into the JFK assassination story some years back, just because I was really curious about what really happened. I really liked the JFK, like who was interested in taking out such a great guy. And you look at the official narratives, right? That okay, some lone gunman came out to kill him. Now, I want to make like two general points, right? First of all, that one, this was a political assassination. This wasn't a highway mugging where somebody comes up on the highway to some random guy and just mugs him to get his gold watch or his Rolex, or to grab his briefcase because there might be gold bars in there or something like that. Like, that wasn't like a highway mugging or a burglary, a house break-in, a breaking into his car to take valuable merchandise out. One, this was a political assassination. So that means when looking at this, you kind of need to look at the pattern of political assassinations. Now, political assassinations, guys, that means it's politically motivated. It's not some guy trying to kidnap him and get a huge ransom payout or something like that. It's taking out a political actor for one reason or another. So we have to look at this in that lens. And then point number two is that in political assassinations, at least the ones that I have looked at, the assassin doesn't act alone. Like, this theory about like the lone wolf gunman, it's almost always wrong in political assassinations. I'll give you just kind of like to put you in the shoes of how these things really happen. Like, look at the start of World War One with the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. Now he got assassinated by apparently some lone gunmen that came up to him. But if you do a lot of digging, what you find is in cases like that, there's often a lot of political sentiment in the mind of the actor that actually pulls the trigger. Those are not ideas he comes up with on his own. Like, he is planted in some ideology. He's moving in some ideology. It's kind of like if I were to go out today and try to assassinate this is not something I want to do, just to be clear. But let's suppose I was to go out there and try to assassinate the Prime Minister of India or the Prime Minister of Japan. I wouldn't just go out there and assassinate the Prime as a lone wolf gunman, because like I need a motive, right? Like, why assassinate the Prime Minister? Why not the Deputy Prime Minister? Why not the or why that particular country? Why not? So maybe there would so there's always gonna be like some kind of ideology that has to influence me as an assassin. And in this case, maybe it would be like, maybe I got influenced by the Zimbabwean government. Now, they haven't done nothing of the sort. Zimbabwe has really good relations with India, and I'm sure with Japan as well. This is all just hypothetical. So maybe I'd get some kind of influence, some ideology. Maybe we're fighting a war with India or Japan, and out of that, somebody sets me up to go pull the trigger. So when I go in, I'm just somebody that's flowing in the current of the ideology, and likely have some people that are much higher up that have set up the whole thing. So you have to really look at like political movements. That's how, like, once something is a political assassination, these are the modus operandi of how such things happen. Like the lone gunman thing, that Lee Harvey Oswald or some other lone gunman could have organized an assassination himself. Like, that's this is again the layman's perspective. Disclaimer, right? This is not political science. This is just the layman's version, right? This is just let's look at a layman's rules of thumb. Just looking at simple facts without any complex knowledge, any complex analysis, any complex nothing of the kind. This is just like 5th grade stuff. How a 5th grader might look at this stuff, right? Is not forget the lone gunman thing. So so who actually did it? Now, I did a lot of analysis, guys, to figure this thing out, and what I found was that John F. Kennedy was at war with the CIA, and apparently the FBI might have been corrupted from within as well. And if you look at his Secret Service, on the actual day of the assassination, it looks like they too were influenced. So if you look at it, you got 3 government agencies that could have conspired to check him out. And then you look at who actually pulled the trigger. I happen to be watching or reading or studying some mafia sources. of all things, like I didn't ever think before that the mafia could have had anything to do with John F. Kennedy's assassination until I happened to read some materials from mafia sources. The mob, Cosa Nostra, the American mob, mobsters, gangsters, things like that. And apparently some mafia hitmen were involved in the actual assassination. So it's possible, it's very possible that the guys that actually pulled the trigger could have been mafia mob hitmen, hired guns. At least that's the way I see it. I would think that it was a mobster hitman hired by corrupt government agencies that actually went down and pulled the trigger. Now, if you look at more recent sources, there's a theory out there that it was a corrupt Secret Service guy, potentially the driver of the car, that actually pulled the trigger and shot John F. Kennedy. That's a more recent theory. I hadn't seen that until very recently. Some people think that's what happened. My own theory was that it was a mob hitman paid by the government, corrupt government agencies. So you got two theories about who pulled the trigger in that. But I think both of them would agree that the idea of the lone gunman thing, like, that's completely bunkum. So there you have it, guys. Of the two, I'm not completely sure which one is correct, because again, this is just a layman's perspective, guys. I don't have any secret documents. I haven't looked at any secret information, so I wouldn't know, right? You gotta make your own call about the two. So let's suppose you're a president. How are you gonna protect yourself from getting assassinated? So the number one tip I would give you guys, something I read online about Fidel Castro, apparently how he actually avoided getting assassinated, because there were so many assassination attempts in his life. But apparently he says the number one thing that has kept him safe is that he actually manages, that he actually used to manage his own, the one thing that kept him safe was he actually used to manage his own, when he was president, he actually used to manage his own security on his own, rather than relying on some agency or some organization to run security for him. So I think that's a really good tip, right? At least if you manage your own security, you are more responsible, and hopefully you are not thinking of getting yourself assassinated. Hopefully you are not conspiring against yourself to get yourself assassinated. But who knows? There might be some hardcore guys out there that just can't help themselves but conspire against whoever is in power, even if that person happens to be them. So now, why I wouldn't be president? Why don't I want to be president? Well, here's my framework for looking at it. All right, real quick is, first of all, I gotta look at who is in charge, who is president at the moment, and look at, can I do a better job than them? And so let's look at real quick at the USA. You got President Joe Biden, you got VP Kamala Harris, as kind of like the incumbents, right? But then you also got Donald Trump. So it would be like looking at, could you do a better job than, assuming one of those people is gonna be president, could you do a better job than that person? Now, for me, it really doesn't matter looking at the US in this case, because I'm not an American, so I couldn't be president there anyway out there. So I have to look at Zimbabwe, right? Now, when I look at Zimbabwe, we have our own president, President Emerson Mnangagwa. So I'd have to look at, like, okay, can I do a better job than him? Now, let's look at that, right? Like, this president, one, he used to be an intelligence chief, so he's a very smart guy, so very competent, very smart guy, in a way that is much smarter than I am, right? Like, so you have to look at that. And then the other thing we have to look at is let's look at some other things, right? Some other attributes, just kind of to kind of compare. So one, a big thing in terms of Zimbabwean politics is corruption. People want a president that's not corrupt. Now, surprisingly, this is, or not surprisingly, this is an area where I could probably do much better because I don't have huge networks of people that are used to taking bribes and have existed on bribe taking and things like that. Whereas when you look at kind of like ruling elites, it's kind of typical that they have huge networks of people, and some of these people will be corrupt, very corrupt. So on that aspect, if I went in as a president, no existing networks of potentially corrupt people, I could probably do better on that front. But that's just one aspect. I mentioned that because that's important in the Zimbabwean perspective. A lot of voters are worried always about corruption. But that's just one aspect of being a president. Now, you also have to look at our skills. The other thing is look at your knowledge of kind of like industry and things like that. So let's look at if you look at Zimbabwe, at the Zimbabwean economy in particular, and you look at the existing president, right? He has a lot of business knowledge. He has a lot of knowledge about agriculture and mining. Now, I know a little bit about business, but I know virtually nothing about agriculture and mining. But our president, this president, actually knows a ton about agriculture and mining. And those happen to be, by the way, the two most important industries for Zimbabwe. Like, that's pretty much our entire economy is agriculture and mining. So on that front, he comes out so much better. He knows a lot of stuff that's gonna be practically important for driving our nation forward. So now he's doing much even better than I am in the ranking. Like the competence, levels is he can do a much better job than I can. And then let's look at like the final factor, which is gonna be again something unique to Zimbabwe, uniquely important to Zimbabwe, is that this president is a liberation war hero, right? He's one of those guys that would be buried at the hero's acre, and rightfully so. He actually fought in Zimbabwe's liberation struggle. Something I as a Zimbabwean highly respect him for. He wasn't one of those guys that were hiding out in the back when everybody else was fighting the big fight, right? He was actually on the ground organizing the fight and helping us win our independence. So that's big. I mean, that's big enough that, I would have to say, like, even if I was more competent on any of the other things, like this on its own is big enough that you should be president. I shouldn't be president. And honestly, so I don't want to be president because we have a much more competent leader actually doing this work. So that's just some of the things that you would have to look at, and definitely for me, that means that I don't want to be president. There's a much better person able to do the job. And hopefully if he can just maintain peace in our country and keep the economy going and solve some of the corruption problems that happen in any country, and get the economy strong and kind of keep everything humming along and things like that, I think he can be a really great president. So there you have it, guys, my perspective on the JFK assassination, who did it, why, and also how to protect yourself if you ever become president.